For a very long time, I have been very frustrated with this White House keeping Joe Biden on script and not allowing Joe Biden to deviate from script or ask questions. And I'm starting to think, okay, I concede the point. Y'all were right. Joe Biden should probably stay on script and not answer questions from the press. Because, in the words of my cousin Brittany, oops, he did it again. This is from Politico. The United States has been providing billions of dollars in weapons and other assistance to Ukraine, with much of that aid going through Poland. The president spent part of last week in the country meeting with U.S. troops stationed in the southeast and delivering a speech about the West's unity in the face of Russian aggression. But to date, the Biden administration has painstakingly made the case that it is as far as they'll go. On March 22nd, Jake Sullivan denied that Americans were currently training Ukrainians. We do, of course, have U.S. troops defending NATO territory, he continued. But that's not what Biden said on Monday. After delivering remarks about the White House's new budget request, Biden answered a reporter's question about comments he made when meeting the 82nd Airborne in Poland, in which he implied American forces would be going to Ukraine. Biden denied that's what he meant, adding, "We're talking about helping train Ukrainian troops that are in Poland." Pressed again, Biden said, "I was referring to being with and talking with the Ukrainian troops that are in Poland." It's possible he meant to say American when he said Ukrainian, or he exaggerated the extent to which American soldiers advised the Ukrainians. But he said, "We are training Ukrainian troops," something the White House has gone to pains to deny. Now, it's not that we've never done it. Up until recently, we were doing it. But the White House has been just going through all sorts of expense and pains and efforts to make it clear that we are not currently, nor have we since the war begun, trained Ukrainian troops. And here goes Joe Biden on Monday at the White House saying, quote, "We're talking about helping train the Ukrainian troops that are in Poland." Oops, he did it again. By the way, he now denies all of his statements that he had to walk back. I think this is useful to go back to yesterday so you can hear the audio from Joe Biden from yesterday, clipped with all of the walkbacks. These are all the statements he made while in Poland and the walkbacks from the White House after making them.
God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
The White House trying to make clear in the aftermath, or making very clear in the aftermath, he was not, in fact, calling for regime change.
And you're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people stand in the middle of front of a damn tank.
White House officials are telling us that President Biden does not intend to send U.S. troops into Ukraine.
If chemical weapons were used in Ukraine, would that trigger a military response from NATO?
It would trigger a response in kind.
The United States has no intention of using chemical weapons, period, under any circumstance.
Now he denies all of this. This is from Joe Biden, confronted by Peter Doocy of Fox News yesterday.
Are you worried that other leaders in the world are going to start to doubt that America is back if some of these big things that you say on the world stage keep getting walked back?
What's getting walked back?
It made it sound like, just in the last couple days, it sounded like you told U.S. troops they were going to Ukraine. It sounded like you said it was possible the U.S. would use a chemical weapon, and it sounded like you were calling for regime change in Russia, and we know...
None of the three occurred.
None of the three occurred?
None of the three occurred, Joe Biden says, if you couldn't hear him. He wasn't talking directly into the microphone there. He was leaning over to be challenged by Pete Doocy. None of the three occurred, he said. You heard him say, I played you the audio. Now, the crass person will say, well, he's got dementia. He doesn't know. I mean, that could be it, grandpa dementia. But I think they're pulling a Trump. They're pulling a Trump. Donald Trump would say, outlandish things. Y'all all know Donald Trump would say outlandish things and then deny that he said them. And when confronted with the evidence, he doubled down on it and just refused to admit he had said it. And many of the major media outlets in this country would go nuts. They would go ballistic over Donald Trump denying that he had said the things that you could see him say on video. And it led to the second coming of the fact checker, Daniel Dale, the Canadian who ruthlessly fact-checked Donald Trump for left-wing organizations, got hired by CNN to go in and do ruthless fact checks of Donald Trump the entire time. I haven't seen Daniel Dale on the case here. Where is he? Where are the fact checkers?
I still want to get back to your original words that he cannot remain in power. Can you help us understand you have more foreign policy experience than any president who has ever held this office? Whether those are your personal feelings or your feelings as president, do you understand why people would believe you, as someone commanding one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, saying someone cannot remain in power is a statement of U.S. policy? And also, are you concerned about propaganda use of those remarks by the Russians?
No and no.
Tell me why. You have so much experience. You are the leader of this country.
Because it's ridiculous. Nobody believes we're going to take down. I was talking about taking down Putin. Nobody believes that. Number one. Number two, what have I been talking about since this all began? The only war that's worse than one intended is one that's unintended. The last thing I want to do is engage in a land war or a nuclear war with Russia. That's not part of it. I was expressing my outrage at the behavior of this man. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And it's more an aspiration than anything. He shouldn't be in power. People like this shouldn't be ruling countries, but they do. The fact they do, but doesn't mean I can't express my outrage about it.
So wait a second. This is the White House spin now. That it was an expression of moral outrage, that for God's sakes, this man can't remain in power. That's what he said. And now it wasn't regime change. It's just a statement of moral power or moral outrage about people like that remaining in power. By the way, did you notice the opening here?
I still want to get back to your original words that he cannot remain in power. Can you help us understand you have more foreign policy experience than any president who has ever held this office?
That's a PBS reporter saying that he has more foreign policy experience than any person who has ever held the presidency. Dwight Eisenhower was the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe from 1943 to 1952. He was the military governor of Germany. He was the NATO Supreme Commander. Apparently, Joe Biden has more experience than that. John Quincy Adams was the major diplomat for the United States for years. Traveled abroad with his father, John Adams, the second president, who himself went to Europe to rally forces for the United States, was the first American after the Revolution to meet with George III after we'd won. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, was the second Secretary of State of the United States, built coalitions with France and others around the world. President Taft, after World War I, set about helping rebuild Europe from Belgium. George H.W. Bush was the ambassador to China and the CIA director. And this reporter thinks that Joe Biden has had more foreign policy experience than any person to ever hold the presidency. That kind of is what's wrong with the press. They have no sense of history. But going back to Biden's comments here, Biden says that he was expressing moral outrage. It wasn't regime change that he wants. He was just expressing moral outrage. Expressing moral outrage by saying that, my God, this man can't remain in power. Maybe he should have expressed his moral outrage in a better way. And then he says this.
Kelly O'Donnell, NBC.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do you believe what you said? Thank you, sir. Do you believe what you said, that Putin can't remain in power? Or do you now regret saying that because your government has been trying to walk that back? Did your words complicate matters?
Well, you asked three different questions. I'll answer them all. Number one, I'm not walking anything back. The fact of the matter is I was expressing the moral outrage I felt toward the way Putin is dealing in the actions of this man. Just brutality of it. half the children in Ukraine. I just come from being with those families. And so, but I want to make it clear, I wasn't then, nor am I now, articulating a policy change. I was expressing the moral outrage that I feel, and I make no apologies for it.
Personal feelings, sir. Your personal feelings?
My personal feelings. Secondly, you asked me about, well, what was the second part?
Does it complicate the diplomacy of this moment?
No, I don't think it does. You know, the fact is that we're in a situation where what complicates the situation at the moment is the escalatory efforts of Putin to continue to engage in carnage, the kind of behavior that that makes the whole world say, "My God, what is this man doing?" That's what complicates things a great deal, and but I don't think it complicates it at all.
So does he want regime change or not? Now, this is relevant because a photographer was able to get a snapshot of the talking points that Biden has in his hand while he's doing all of this. This is not Photoshop. This is actually, I think it's the Associated Press photographer. Every president gets these, but it's kind of damning in this circumstance. They had to give the president these talking points, and this, you need to pay attention to this. This is a scripted talking point from the White House staff for him to do. Here is the tough Putin Q&A talking points. Number one, if you weren't advocating for regime change, what did you mean? Can you clarify? Bullet point one, I was expressing the moral outrage I felt towards the actions of this man. Number two, I was not articulating a change in policy. They had to put that on a note card for the President of the United States to repeat. Number two, Macron has said he won't have used these. The U.S. government suggesting it's blocked by the microphone. It was a problem. Is it now threatening to splinter unity with your NATO allies? No, NATO has never been more unified. Y'all, the White House staff had to print out a note card for the president wherein they instructed him to say, quote, I was expressing the moral outrage I felt towards the actions of this man. I was not articulating a change in policy, end quote. They had to put that on a piece of paper for the President of the United States to repeat to reporters, which he repeatedly repeated to reporters, and then denied that he had ever said any of the other stuff that he said. What is going on with this president? We're not going to get the 25th Amendment, but we got 2 more years of this. When Donald Trump did this stuff, the American media went nuts. They went ballistic. With Joe Biden, they're trying to give him every benefit of the doubt. At some point, your benefit of the doubt is undermining the United States by our inability to have an honest conversation about this president's mental fitness for the office of the presidency. You don't go to Europe and give a massive speech that you compare to Ronald Reagan's tear down this wall speech and say, for God's sakes, this man cannot remain in power, which is a clear call for regime change, and then say, I was just expressing moral outrage. I wasn't articulating a change in policy, but I think he needs to go, but I'm not saying we're going to make that policy, but he should go. It may make you feel good that he said it, but there are some things that make you feel good you want presidents to say when in reality they're not supposed to say them. And this is one of those things, and he said it, and now the White House staff had to literally make him hold a note card and repeat verbatim a statement that said he was expressing moral outrage. What is his mental fitness for office? You should be concerned.